You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 65. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. One of my favorite qualities in myself and other people is creativity. I am often amazed and in awe when I think about the masterpieces that have been created, and I don't just mean paintings that you can visit in a museum. I mean anything that was created out of the tiniest seed of an idea, or a hunch, or a nudge, or just the faintest spark of inspiration. It could be a joke. A simple little joke could have resulted from someone's imagination in just 1 second. It could be a novel, or song lyrics, or a design for a house, or it could be a marketing campaign, including a clever slogan and a memorable commercial. I am amazed at the creativity of Vince Gilligan, who created the TV shows Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, among many other things. I'm just fascinated that he thought of an entire fictional universe of characters and events and then produced it into reality by making TV shows and movies. And right now, since I have started to get interested in gardening, I am so impressed with the beautiful gardens other people have created. I love the mix of colors and scents and textures and heights and purposes. Some plants are for eating and some plants are for looking at and some plants are for the ecosystem. It's a growing, breathing, changing 3D work of art. All of these amazing creations I've just mentioned most likely have something in common. They probably all started with a bright idea or a brainstorm. And I think it's possible to train your brain to be creative so it gives you more of those great ideas. Why not celebrate your creativity? Start to look for patterns of what makes you think of new things, what makes you willing to come up with solutions to problems, and what makes you hesitant to find solutions. Why not figure out what sometimes holds you back from moving forward on something that you were previously so excited about? In case you haven't noticed, I have been brimming with creativity lately. It is so fun and energizing, and I hope you are feeling this high vibe in your own work and in your life too. Part of what is making me notice my heightened level of creativity is realizing how many fun, interesting, and imaginative ideas that are just coming to me nonstop. And I want to capture this essence and tell you about it so that you can replicate it for yourself and so that I can also replicate it later, since I am aware that this season probably won't last indefinitely, but maybe it will, who knows? So in an effort to inspire you and give you examples of these bright ideas and brainstorms, I have a list of a few of mine that have taken off and some that didn't get so far. The first one that I have to bring up is creating this podcast. Since you are listening to it right now, we are sharing the fruits of my creativity. The reason I decided to start this podcast is multi-part. I had been listening to and loving podcasts for years, and I thought it was such an effective way to get in front of an audience. I thought of a few ideas of podcasts other people should do to grow their businesses or to promote their causes, and I got really excited for them. But I couldn't see that promotion and growth idea being applicable to me until I was finishing up my coach certification program and thinking of starting my own coaching practice. And then suddenly, having my own podcast made a lot of sense for me. And as I was in the planning stages, I was very intentional about defining what success would be for me with this podcast. I didn't want my definition of success to hinge on factors outside of my control. So I decided I would consider the podcast a success if I had at least one listener for each episode. And that was built-in guaranteed success because I had already decided to be that listener for each episode. Secondly, I made the commitment to post an episode each Friday of 2020, no matter what. And I did. Success achieved. Of course, now I can see many other ways to define the success of this podcast, but back in the brainstorming phase, using those two definitions helped to keep me moving forward and kept me focused on what I personally cared about. The next bright idea to tell you about is currently in the execution phase, and I am loving it so much. At the end of February, I got the inspirational nudge to try to put together a surrender study group. I wanted to have a group of other people on their own journeys of surrender to talk to and ask questions of and check in with for understanding and camaraderie. And I was so excited about the prospect of hearing something explained from a different perspective that I hadn't thought of. I am a firm believer that the best way to learn something is to teach it. So, like a teacher, I was completely excited by the idea of developing lists of topics for each of our weekly calls and discussions. And even though we're just barely over the halfway point of our study group, I have to tell you how perfect it is. The community is thoughtful, supportive, and participative. And even the people who aren't able to join us on our weekly calls add to our discussion in the Facebook group. I am getting a deeper understanding of how to surrender and how to live my life in abundance. And I really attribute my current flow of creativity to the fact that I am steeping myself in these topics. The third thing I'll tell you about came out of what might be considered a more traditional brainstorm. Most people would probably describe brainstorming as listing as many ideas as possible in one session without judgment or criticism. The point is to just let all the ideas come out like a torrent of rain during a storm. And then the ideas can be evaluated and discarded and decided on. Last year, at the beginning of COVID, I was trying to think of interesting and unique ideas for creating online meetups. So I came up with a whole list of them, and I tried them all. Some were fine, some were flops, but one really took off. It was Pod Club. I always liked the idea of book clubs, but never really participated consistently because I never liked the commitment of having to read a specific book by a specific time. It felt like a school assignment. I always secretly wished there was a magazine club where instead of reading a whole book, we could just flip through a magazine. But the better solution was staring me right in the eye, or rather the ear. In a pod club, we are not committed to reading an entire book. We just listen to one episode of a podcast and then get together to discuss. And we have listened to the most interesting episodes about a variety of topics, and we have had the best discussions. I am so pleased and proud and encouraged that we're about to come up on our 1-year anniversary of Pod Club's invention. So even though the low attendance at some of those early other meetups I experimented with might have kept me from moving forward, I am so glad I kept taking those teeny tiny steps to try them out and to finally land on one that has worked so well. The first 3 bright ideas that I just shared with you were public-facing and involve other people. So the next 2 ideas are ones that I am doing on my own, and I'm sharing them because they have been working out so well for me and to illustrate to you that your bright ideas and brainstorms can be completely private and personal things that you do in your own life for your own benefit that other people may never find out about unless you publicly announce them like I'm doing now. At the beginning of this year, I started the practice of intentionally giving myself credit. This may seem obvious and basic, but really, how often do you intentionally look for and acknowledge things that you deserve to give yourself credit for? This idea came from a coaching session. In fact, I think my coach even asked me, "What are you giving yourself credit for in this situation?" And the question stumped me. I couldn't think of anything I was giving myself credit for. So I decided to take the teeny tiny step of answering that question in my journaling the next morning. And then I took that step a little further by sprinkling credit-giving prompts in my journal for the next few months. And now, every once in a while, when I sit down to write, I come to a question like, what 10 things do you deserve credit for as a friend? Or, what did you do in the past week that you deserve credit for? I love seeing these prompts and answering them because I know I am developing my own skill at acknowledging and appreciating myself. Plus, who doesn't like to get credit for things? The last successful bright idea that I'll share with you is one that I've already talked about so much. It's when I decided to follow Eileen Shu's example to journal daily. I've done a few episodes about journaling and my morning ritual, and I have described why Eileen is one of my favorite teachers. So today I'll just add to say, at the time I decided to follow this idea, I considered success as journaling daily and loving it and being able to see all the positive benefits from it. Check, check, and check. I don't remember if I asked myself at the time what might keep me from moving forward, but I probably had the fear or doubt that I wouldn't keep moving forward. I know that's one of the number one reasons people don't start journaling. They don't think they'll keep the habit going. I overcame that by building my whole daily schedule, including work and working out and everything else, around my journaling time. And I protect that time fiercely. Now let's talk about some ideas that I thought were great, but didn't take off quite as much. You've probably picked up on the fact that I am into the woo. I like tarot and crystals and astrology and a lot of other woo-adjacent topics. And I have been known to enjoy a glass of wine here or there. So back in 2019, I came up with the bright idea of creating a series of workshops called Woo and Wines Workshops, where each week we would learn about a woo topic and enjoy some wine together. The idea excited me because it combines a few of my favorite topics. But alas, the workshops never made it into existence. The idea did result in 2 Woo and Wine Wednesday night meetups, which were interesting, and it prompted a Woo and Wine weekend to Sedona that was to include, among other things, attending a seance. But we didn't make it that night because we did too much wine tasting earlier in the day. Oh well. Also in the workshop brainstorming category, a few years ago, I tested out the idea of hosting craft workshops where people could come together for a happy hour or a weekend afternoon to make an easy craft to take home or to give as a gift. And at the time, I was considering success to be a viable business opportunity. It really didn't take off for me like that, though, and probably my slow takeoff by my own standards was what kept me from moving forward. But I am so glad that I tried it out, and I am even more glad that I am not running those workshops now. So what am I doing now? What was I referring to when I mentioned that I am brimming with creativity? My current bright idea that I am so excited about launching today is my journal shop. I have started creating and selling journals and notebooks. It's more than just blank journals. These are themed journals, prompted journals, and notebooks for specific purposes. And ever since the spark of inspiration, I've been brainstorming topics and themes and cover designs, and I have been having so much fun. I've been engaged, inspired, and delighted. And this is so aligning for me because I love journaling, as you know, and making lists and taking notes. Plus, I get the fun artistic outlet of imagining and designing covers full of color and images with lots of different fun fonts. So far, I have created books that go along with concepts I personally live by and use. For example, I have a dream interpretation journal, a birthday list notebook, and, maybe you already guessed it, a Bright Ideas and Brainstorms book. This whole episode has been an example of how and why you could use that last one. The book has space for you to write out your bright ideas and brainstorms and then ask yourself questions like, why? And why does this excite me? What might success look like? What might keep me from moving forward? What is a teeny tiny first step I could take? Where did this idea come from? Imagine if the next time you get a bright idea or brainstorm, you can write it down and answer some questions about it intentionally with curiosity and awareness. Imagine if you had a specific place to put all your amazing new concepts so that you could come back to them later to develop them further or to revive them if you forgot about them. You don't have to imagine it. You can own it and hold and write in a physical copy in your own hands within just a few days. Isn't this fun and interesting and creative? If you want to take a look at this book that I've been describing, you can see a link to it at the bottom of the show notes for this episode at bexby.org/bright ideas. That's all squished together, no spaces, BRIGHTIDEAS. And you can see all the journals and notebooks I have created so far at bexby.org/shop journals. Again, all squished together, no spaces, SHOPJOURNALS, shop journals. The page is a little empty right now as the ideas are in various stages of creation. So bookmark that page and check back often to see what else becomes available. I have an entire pipeline full of brainstorms to create for you, and I cannot wait to share more as they come out. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for joining me on this exciting, invigorating, and creative ride. And here's hoping that you feel excited, invigorated, and creative too. Talk to you next week. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexby.org to see how we can work together.